Friends, the reading I've chosen for this morning comes from the Unitarian minister, the Reverend David Eaton, who was a predecessor of mine at All Souls Church in Washington, D.C., where I served for many years. Reverend Eaton was one of All Souls' longest tenured ministers and its first African-American minister. And he spoke words, just brief words, that have always been at the heart of what I believe about church. Reverend Eaton says, "The church is that institution whose primary purpose is to help people discover, create, and maintain hope in their lives. When people have no hope, they discover hope together. And when they cannot discover hope, they create hope together." Here ends our reading. The Jewish novelist Chaim Potok tells a story of when his family celebrated the holidays in a dark and difficult time. Jews around the world were still reeling when Hanukkah arrived in December 1938. Just a few weeks earlier, the Nazi regime had ransacked Jewish neighborhoods, burned hundreds of synagogues, shipped thousands of people off to concentration camps in a night that came to be known as Kristallnacht, the night of shattered glass. Chaim Potok was just a boy then, 9 years old. But he never forgot his family's holiday celebrations that year. When the sun went down on the first night of Hanukkah, Potok's aging father put on his yarmulke and gathered up the candles and matches, and with his wife and son looking on, he lit the first candle on the menorah, softly reciting the ritual words. "We kindle these lights on account of the miracles, deliverances, and wonders which you did for our ancestors." Potok recalls that the words of that prayer seemed to mock his family that year. Where were their miracles? Where was their deliverance? And as he stared at the lone candle on the menorah, he thought how pitiful that flame seemed, how utterly insignificant, insufficient against the malignant darkness outside our window. But nevertheless, the very next evening, the family repeated the ritual. The father again put on his yarmulke and lit the candles and said the prayer, and again until the 8th and final night, when one last time he repeated the incantation, this time nearly shouting the words as if he could will them into being. "We kindle these lights on account of the miracles and the deliverances and the wonders which you did for our ancestors." And then silence. The family stared at the menorah, and even with all the candles burning, the light failed to cheer them. Finally, the father turned to his son and said, "You want a miracle, don't you? I want a miracle too. But if it doesn't come, we'll make a miracle ourselves." Sometimes, Potok's father continued, "sometimes I think man is a greater miracle worker than God. God doesn't have to live day after day on this broken planet. Perhaps, son, you will learn to make your own miracles. I will try to teach you how to make human miracles. I always find that this is a difficult story to tell and to hear during the holidays, because it's the story about the holidays coming at a difficult time. In this case, a dark time. But I really appreciate Chaim Potok's testimony. I appreciate his honesty. I appreciate that both he and his father are willing to interrogate their religious tradition and even admit that the tradition might feel inadequate to that moment, inadequate to the crisis that they find themselves in. They're willing to admit that in that moment the prayers sound hollow, that the ritual feels empty, and that in the face of a clear and present danger, the stories of God's deliverance of ancestors in times gone by feels more like a betrayal than a promise. Why would God deliver our ancestors and not us? Why would God forsake us? These aren't easy or comfortable questions to ask. But at one time or another, almost every person of faith wrestles with questions like these. We reckon with the perceived limits or inadequacies of our inherited faith or our current belief system. We reckon with God having let us down. Sometimes the faith that we've inherited or the beliefs that we've been taken to be true for much of our lives seem to be telling us one thing, but our own lived experience seems to be telling us something utterly different. And we can't reconcile the two. It can be a very painful place, a time of spiritual upheaval and even crisis, but it can also be a moment of spiritual opportunity and creativity. When we come to a spiritual impasse like this, when our received wisdom and current lived experience appear to be incompatible, we have three options, really, and only three. We can reject our inherited beliefs. We can reject our religious traditions, toss them aside, move on. That's one option, right? Or number two, we can deny our own lived experience, suppress it, explain it away, pretend it didn't happen. That's another option. But there's a third, and I think more life-giving option. We can become theologians, right? In other words, we can wrestle new meaning from this moment of impasse by bringing our tradition and our lived experience into creative dialogue with one another, right? That's what it means to be a theologian, right? And I think that's what the Father is doing in this story. He's becoming a theologian right on the spot there. On the 8th night of Hanukkah, he's saying, okay, it's Hanukkah. It's a story about our people's long history with God and God's miracles. But here we are in a dark time, and God doesn't seem to be stepping up. My son wants a miracle. My wife and I want a miracle. So let's write a new chapter in the story of our people's history with miracles. We'll learn how to make our own. We'll learn how to make human miracles. Human miracles. That might sound to you like an oxymoron, right? And especially at the holidays, a season that we've come to associate with miracles and wonder, a human miracle might sound like, well, a little bit of a letdown, a fallback position, settling. But I don't see it that way, Because if you scratch the surface of any of these great stories from these December holidays, these winter holidays, what you get is a heavy dose of human grit and determination and hope. Maybe mixed in with a little assist from the Almighty, sure. But that's really almost secondary in these stories. The Maccabees of Hanukkah fame were first and foremost freedom fighters, a courageous people who freed their people from an oppressive ruler. Sure, God let the oil in their lamps burn for 8 nights, but that's not the main event here. Hanukkah is the story of a human miracle. And Christmas, when I look at the Christmas story, I see the tale of a baby born to poor, unwed, immigrant parents, a baby who the emperor himself is out to get. But look what happens. And notice next Sunday when our children tell you the story in their Christmas pageant, what you'll see is a story about how all the characters, Mary, Joseph, the shepherds and wise men, the cattle and angels, how they all work together to protect this vulnerable child, this vulnerable life. They're collaborators, they're conspirators. Everybody plays their part. Sure, God sent a star to lead them to the manger, but for me, Christmas is a story about human solidarity, human miracles. And the winter solstice, a celebration of the sun returning to the earth just when it seemed like it had left us, that's just a story about Mother Nature being her own resilient self, right? The stories of this season are stories of miracles and wonder, but they're stories of human miracles and stories of earthly wonder. If God gives us a little assist here and there, well, then all the better. But what I want to focus on this holiday season, what I feel like I need to focus on this holiday season and in the months and years that lie ahead for us, are the human miracles. Yesterday I returned to Cambridge from some holiday travels. This year, like every year, my husband and my son and I spend our Thanksgiving with dear friends, our chosen family. We're a ragtag group of mostly queer folks. Weirdly, about half of us, are seminarians or clergy from having met in seminary. The other half, strangely, were theater folks who all met one another in the downtown New York theater scene, plus our kids and our pets. And for 3 days, all we do is cook and eat together, and we go on walks by the ocean and toss a Nerf football and watch the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. And then on Friday, we always go see a movie together. It's simple and fun, and it's one of my favorite times of the year. But something felt different this year at our gathering. I don't know if you felt it too. First of all, everyone made an extra effort to be there this year, to show up for one another. Most years, there's 1 or 2 folks who can't come for whatever reason, but this year, there was never any doubt that we'd all be there. And then on Thursday, as we sat down to our feast, we paused for a moment, as we always do, to give thanks. Usually, someone will say a prayer then, or make a toast, depending on whether they're one of the ministers in the group or one of the actors in the group. But this year, no one spoke up. This year we just sat in silence for several moments, holding hands, soaking up one another's presence and the bountiful meal that lay before us. Some of us were smiling, others were shedding quiet tears, and still others of us were smiling through our tears. And what remained unspoken through it all was the knowledge that this is what we're going to need. It's what we're going to need to do as we move forward through these uncertain times. We're going to need to gather with those we love. We're going to need to eat and drink and make merry with one another and care for one another and organize with one another. We've had years like this before. We know what we need to do to survive and thrive in times like these. We know how to make human miracles. And then we ate our fabulous meal and our pumpkin pie, and on Friday, we went to see our movie. Now, I described for you our group, so can you guess which movie we chose to see? Gladiator or Wicked? What do you think? Yeah. Both, yeah. We'll see both eventually. We saw Wicked on Friday, and I'll tell you, it was just what the doctor ordered, right? How many of you have seen Wicked or seen the show maybe, or the book or whatever? I think we all need to be reminded this year that while it's foolish to deny gravity, right? That's not a miracle we human beings can pull off. We can't deny gravity, nor any of those other forces that seek to drag us down or hold us back. We can't do that. But it is possible for us to defy gravity, right? To resist those forces, to oppose them. That was just the message I needed to hear this holiday season. And I'll tell you, by the end of that movie, I was ready to hop up on my broom and get to work, right? Defying gravity. That's a human miracle. This sermon is getting kind of gay. I'm glad that maybe she stepped out. So, yeah. Preaching about the Wizard of Oz. But friends, maybe in the months to come, a human miracle will look like a doctor who crosses state lines to help a woman exercise her reproductive freedom. Maybe a human miracle will look like people of faith organizing to provide sanctuary for a vulnerable family. Maybe a human miracle looks like a small congregation in Harvard Square trying to prepare a meal for those who might otherwise not have one. Maybe it looks like friends gathered around a meal for a holiday, or people taking a casserole to someone who just got back from the hospital, or maybe it looks like a group of people sitting in this beautiful sanctuary, listening to one another's joys and sorrows, holding one another in our hearts. Maybe that's what our human miracle is going to look like this year. In our reading this morning, the Reverend David Eaton said, "The church is that institution whose primary purpose is to help people discover, create, and maintain hope in their lives. When people have no hope, they discover hope together. And when they can't discover hope, by God, they create hope together." The operative word, friends, is together. Together we'll sing and pray. Together we'll organize and march. Together we'll light candles in the dark. Together we'll bless our children and remember our dead and provide sanctuary to the vulnerable. Together we'll find our hope. And all of it will be a miracle. A very human miracle. May it be so, and amen.